very important thing that we want the government to do in economics is to help provide these things called public goods. So I want you to just think about this for a second. So I want you to think about how many roads there would be in your town, how many roads there would be in your town if the government did not provide roads, if it was all private provision. If enough people want it, they buy it. The answer is almost none, because once the road is provided, everybody gets to use it. So what's the incentive to do it? This is what we call that free rider problem that we were talking about in that video. Some people will contribute to it, but not very many, because I can use the road even though I didn't contribute. So I still get to use the road. And so this becomes the whole problem of the thing. We call these public goods. Public goods are stuff available to everybody as opposed to private goods. So for example, my car is a private good, the road is a public good. And there's a whole lot of these public goods out there. Things like roads, schools, national defense, minimum wage. These are all public goods. They're not just stuff. I know I say stuff here, but it's also like the quality of stuff. So like clean air is a public good. National defense, which isn't really a thing you can point to at all, once national defense is provided, you get to enjoy it whether you paid your taxes or not. So the question becomes, why are these often provided by the state? And the answer is this free rider problem. Is these public goods what we find is that without government, I'm just going to write this down. Without government, public goods tend to be under-provided. You'll have a few roads here and there, but you're not going to have enough roads. You'll have some national defense, but you won't have enough national defense. And so this becomes part of the problem. And so what government does is government gets involved and it essentially taxes you and then spends on these public goods that wouldn't be provided in a free market. That's the whole idea. And government does a lot of these things, and we want government to do a lot of these things. The conversation doesn't come about, the debate in America and other states isn't about whether government should do this. It's often about how much the government should do. Like, let's take healthcare, for example. Healthcare is a public good. So we want good healthcare. If the government's not providing it, it's a public good, so it's going to tend to be underprovided. So, for example, in America, and I'll just take America for example because that's the one I know the most, we say that's fine, but there are some things that we don't want to happen. So, for example, if you are sick, dying, whatever, and you are poor and you walk into an emergency room, the emergency room can't kick you out. That is a public good. Essentially, we have said it as a country, we don't want sort of at the bare minimum, we don't want people to die of things that can be prevented. That being said, that's one side of it. But on the other hand, we could also say, well, maybe we want more. Like, for example, maybe we want universal health care, like, say, a system in Canada or a system in many countries in Europe, where essentially we're saying we want that bare minimum, that amount that is provided to be more. So this is the conversation. Societal differences, there are societal differences in what is a public good. That's a big part of a conversation that every country has. So Canada, for example, has universal health care. They call that a public good. The United States says, no, it's really not. Though, again, even that conversation has been changing over the last few years. Obamacare is not universal health care, but it is a step closer to that than it was sort of before. We have things like Social Security, we have minimum wage, we have these things that we say we don't want, there are things that we don't want to have happen. But without the government providing it, it won't happen. And so that's what ends up going. So there's underlying ideological differences. There's no question that the United States has a different ideological idea about, say, healthcare than, say, Canada does. And that's going to play out in terms of what the society expects the government to provide in terms of public good. So there's some key political questions, again, that are very economics questions. What public goods should be provided? How much should be provided? These are the conversations of politics, economics, and how they interact with each other. All right, we're going to move on. We're going to start talking about money. So go watch a video.